Right, Bill? The bird catches a worm, but who likes worms?
The bird does.
Yeah. The bird in the hand.
Can you hear me speaking? Well, the people in the back row, can you hear me speaking?
This is Bill. I'm from.
Not loud enough. Loud. How's that? That better? I'll project my voice. Well, welcome everyone. We're happy to see you. It's a beautiful evening. We have great entertainment as usual. First, I'm going to let Phil make an announcement about an upcoming tour, and then I will come back to you.
I really don't need that microphone, I don't believe.
No, you don't.
See? That's what Sherry Kroll says.
Yeah.
So anyway, I hope you all had a good time last week at the train depot. And the lunch was good. The Lagarde was a nice restaurant. I sent her an email thanking her. She had that whole nice area set up for us just for our group. There were 27 of us. That was our biggest turnout. 20, I think 5 was our best one before. I'm trying to work on one to come up next month in September. I've already been talking to the lady in charge, but she's been busy with a wedding. But, you know, next Monday is a regular scheduled meeting. You know, we meet the 4th Monday of every month. Next Monday will be the 4th. So I will try to have a sign-up sheet, and I'm trying to get us to go to Palomar Mountain, where old Nate Harrison lived in the 1800s. You can look it up on Harrison Serenity Ranch. So anyway, it's got, I made some notes here. It's got 50,000 artifacts, over 50,000 artifacts up there. They have stables, bunkhouses, main house. It overlooks Palma Valley. Region's first African-American homesteader. He was a slave in the South, and he left there and came to Palomar Mountain. It's 3,000 feet sea level. It's on the, it's in San Diego County. It's in the northern San Diego County on the west side of Palomar Mountain. There's large pine trees, fir trees, and cedar trees up there. So it'll be a little cooler. Last week it was a little bit warm in Paris, so I decided to go south this time. So at 3,000 feet. So anyway, I'll try to have this done by next week. We'll have a sign-up sheet, and then you'll know we'll have some more details about it. So
Phil,
anyway.
Tell them about how serendipitous this is. Remember I said it's Italian with the next talk, Dale Garcia's talk? About Palomar Observatory.
Yeah, I think next week, aren't you going to do the Palomar Mountain thing? Yeah. So how functional is that?
Serendipity, Phil.
Serendipity.
Fortunate accident.
Where it usually is?
Lynn may have the answer to that question.
Because we got a couple ladies here that are unfamiliar. We were telling them how great it was. So it's usually the Monday night. So
I think we have some new people here, don't we? Yeah.
Well, it's nice to see some new people here. We have another program next Monday, same time, 7 o'clock. And it will be Dale Garcia talking about the history of the Palomar Mountain and things that fall from the sky. Okay, turn up.
Yeah. Be here.
Okay, who cannot hear me?
nobody's going to raise their hand.
Turn that up.
Somebody
If you
just,
cannot hear me, why did you raise your hand?
somebody just asked in the back if it's going to be here next week.
Yes, it's here, 7 o'clock. Okay? Also, I have some membership things that I can hand you before you leave. Give you a little information and a recent newsletter. That good? Great. All right, so, good catch. So Michele Elling is going to be portraying Edna Swanguen. And I just want to tell you a little about Michele and her husband Tom. Michele and Tom have been members of the society for a number of years, and they moved here to the Temecula Valley in 1989. Michele is a twin. She and her husband Tom have twin grandsons who are now 2 years old. Both Tom and Michele are retired teachers. Michele taught at Temecula Valley High School, Chaparral High School, Margarita Middle School, and at Earl Stanley Gardner School. She moved around a lot. Tonight you're going to meet Edna Swanguen, the woman who owned the first restaurant in what is now known as Old Town. She also operated the only telephone switchboard in the Temecula Valley. The stories that she could tell. Please welcome Mrs. Edna Swanguen.
I put my rubber band away, so that works out. We're good? All right. Well, I've got some good news and some bad news to share with you. I'll give you the good news first. We are finally getting dial telephones in Temecula. Here it is, November 1961, and we're finally catching up with the rest of the world. Yes, even as I speak, the General Telephone Company has men that are installing a modern relay box on Highway 395. Now, just think about what this means. Now, residents and merchants can have dial telephones in their houses and places of business. No more having to have your calls connected by that nosy switchboard operator who you know is listening in. But, see, this is bad news for me because it means I'm out of a job. Yes, I'm that nosy switchboard operator. I've been connecting your calls for 43 years. Let me tell you my story. My name is Edna Swanguen. I was Christian Edna Clara Hall, and I was born on October 7th, 1896. My parents were Frank and Lizzie Hall. Dad was born in Michigan in 1859, and Mom was born in New York in 1872. They got married in 1890, and they had 3 children. I was the middle child. My older brother George was born in 1894, and my baby sister Ethel was born in 1900. She was a century baby. The 3 of us children were born in Los Angeles, where Mom and Dad owned a house on Philadelphia Street. But in the early years of the century, my parents moved all of us to Temecula. Now, at the time of our move, Los Angeles had a population of around 320,000. The Temecula town site, in contrast, had about 150 residents. So as you can imagine, life was very different here for us. Take school, for example. In Los Angeles, our school had contained many classrooms, 1 for each grade level. But in Temecula, Ethel and I were enrolled at the Pujol School. This was named for Mercedes Pujol. This was a 1-room schoolhouse, and we only had about 20 classmates. The school had been built in 1889 and sat on a knoll above Front Street. It was later moved and was converted to a church. My family lived on Pujol Street, where we ran a boarding house for railroad personnel, because in those days the trains came to Temecula. Mom liked to keep busy. Meanwhile, Dad bought the Palace Livery Stable from Mr. Hugh McConville. This was located on the corner of Front and Main Streets. The Palace Livery Stable was considered one of the best in Riverside County. Times are changing, however. The livery stable became obsolete with the advent of the affordable Model T. So by 1914, the livery stable had closed and was replaced with Temecula's first bank. By 1915, my folks had opened a restaurant on Front Street. It was called Hall's Cafe, but it was known to the locals as the lunchroom. Now, Hall's Cafe was a big deal because it was the first public eating establishment in town. When the restaurant first opened, Mom served meals for 35 cents a piece, and it was all you can eat. Many of our customers were cattlemen from the Vail Ranch. That's that big ranch outside of town that employs several hands. We also had customers from the trains that stopped in Temecula. Saturday nights were especially busy at the cafe. For example, I can remember one night in 1916 when Mr. Pharrell Freeman gave a dance. 28 couples attended, and then Mom and I served them supper afterwards at the cafe. Like I said, Mom liked to keep busy because she also worked the town switchboard, which was housed in a room behind the cafe. And just to add to the general chaos of the cafe, the Temecula post office was located in there from 1915 to 1938. So my brother George, my sister Ethel, and I all came of age in Temecula. Now, Ethel eventually left. She finished high school in Los Angeles, and in 1922, she graduated from the nurses' training school of the California Hospital there. But George and I both stayed in Temecula. George became a cowhand at the Vail Ranch, and I helped Mom in the cafe. On May 12, 1915, I tied the knot with my honey, Carl Swanguen. Carl was born in 1893, and his family had a rather colorful history in Temecula. His father, Preston, had married a widow, Blanche Johnson, in 1886. Now, Blanche had had children from her previous marriage, and at some point, Preston divorced Blanche and married her daughter, Cassie. They had, Preston and Cassie had 4 children together, and my husband Carl was their second. Preston Swanguen was known for another reason, a tragic reason. Perhaps you've heard of Horace McGee. He was a Temecula resident who got drunk on Christmas Eve, 1907, and murdered 2 men after an altercation at the Blind Pig Saloon. Well, one of his victims was my future father-in-law, Preston, who had been the town constable at the time. So Carl and I got married, and we helped Mom run the cafe. We lived in rooms behind it. Now, originally, the cafe used oil lamps for illumination. But to keep up with the times, Mom replaced the oil lamps with gas lights in 1917, and she added an ice cream parlor too. Then, when the power line from Murrieta reached Temecula in the 1920s, electricity replaced gas lights. Yes, Hall's Cafe kept up with all the modern technology. In 1918, when I was 21, the switchboard operations were handed over to me. It was a Kellogg switchboard, and I manned that switchboard 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I even connected calls in the middle of the night. Now, I trained myself to wake up, to facilitate the calls, and then go right back to sleep. I slept with it, and ate with it because it rang day and night. I was known as Edna to my phone users. If someone called me Mrs. Swanguen, I wouldn't know who they were referring to. Our telephones had a handpiece called a receiver, and each phone customer had their own numeric code, just a few digits. Some families shared a code, and that was called a party line. If a customer wanted to make a call, they would pick up the receiver. They would hear me say, "Number, please." I would use that number code to connect the call. And while it's true, I may have listened in, was I privy to a lot of local gossip that way. But I didn't blab. I could be trusted to keep secrets. And the job wasn't all fun. In the case of emergency, I had to keep a cool head and respond quickly. Now, in 1917, the United States joined into World War I, and many of our local boys got the patriotic bug and joined the cause. My brother George joined the Army, and he fought in France until the armistice of 1918. He was wounded, and at one point we took a road trip to San Diego to visit him while he was recovering at Camp Kearney. My husband Carl was not so fortunate. He registered for the draft, but his petition to join the United States military was denied due to medical reasons, probably because of the appendectomy that he'd undergone in February 1917. Now, I am truly my mother's daughter, as I like to keep myself busy. So I was operating the telephone switchboard, and I was working in the cafe, but I also managed to raise 2 daughters at this point. Marjorie May entered the world in July of 1918, and her little sister, Betty Jane, was born in January of 1922. Now, being that I'm a modern woman, my babies were born in Riverside so that I could give birth at the hospital there. While my little girls were growing up, Temecula was a small town of a few hundred people. But by the 1920s, things were changing with the times. Front Street was paved and was part of the Inland Highway. It was later designated as part of Highway 395. And along the way, filling stations, more restaurants, and hotels for motoring tourists sprang up. For example, the Palomar Inn was built in 1927. Now, this was Temecula's first modern hotel because it boasted electricity and indoor bathrooms. Yes, Temecula had modern amenities at this point in time, but parts of Temecula still looked like a town in the Old West during the 1920s. Added to that, we had the train that still came through, so we were fairly accessible to Hollywood. And for those reasons, filmmakers often brought their cast and crew here to shoot westerns. My 2 daughters attended the Temecula Union School. This was comprised of 2 classrooms with 40 to 50 students, grades 1 through 8. Anybody who wanted to go to high school beyond grade 8 had to go all the way to Lake Elsinore. And of course, today, in 1961, our high school students still attend Elsinore High School. In 1937, Mom moved back to Los Angeles. She left Hall's Cafe to Carl and me to run. Sometimes people trying to place calls had to wait for me to connect them because I was busy serving food. The restaurant opened early, and if you were lucky, you might see me serving breakfast in my nightgown. Now, I'm a prolific smoker, and customers may have been treated to cigarette ashes in their meals occasionally, as I smoked while preparing food, but they were none the worse for it. All the local people ate at Hall's Cafe. The Knotts, the Barnetts, the Rory Paws, yes, even Earl Stanley Gardner. You know, he created that lawyer character, Perry Mason, who's on the television. He has a big ranch near Temecula. Carl and I later owned the Greyhound Bus Depot, which was adjacent to Hall's Cafe. Now, if you think about it, this was a smart way to guarantee customers. During World War II, we were kept especially busy because buses would pull in, jammed with servicemen on the way to one of the many bases in Southern California. And often the military did use the inland route instead of the coastal routes because of ship attacks, fear of ship attacks along the coast. Carl and I were also local Western Union agents at one point in time. Yes, we were both busier than one-armed bricklayers. Now, in 1943, the California Water and Telephone Company took over telephone service in this area, and they offered me a salary of $30 a month. Carl, my husband, was not okay with that. He thought my services were more valuable, and he threatened the California Water and Telephone Company with my resignation. Well, the employers must have had a change of heart. They must have liked the job I was doing because we renegotiated a salary that was a whopping $300 a month. In 1954, Carl decided that we were ready to retire from the restaurant business. I resigned under protest. What are the border patrolmen going to do for food, I asked. But Carl assured me that there were now other restaurants in Temecula and that the agents wouldn't starve. So our cafe closed Christmas Eve, 1954, just in time to spend Christmas with the family. At this point, I had a little bit of free time for other pursuits. Of course, there were grandchildren to spoil. And in October 1954, I was named chairperson of the local Ground Observer Corps. Now, the Ground Observer Corps was a civil defense program that was initiated during World War II. It was resurrected during the Red Scare in the 1950s. Volunteers like me spotted and identified planes, and we reported them to the Air Defense Command. I continued to do this until 1958, and at that point, the United States Army and Air Force had developed radar systems to monitor aircraft. So, although Hall's Cafe had closed, I did continue my career as a switchboard operator. But with dial telephones coming to Temecula now, my job is obsolete. Well, maybe it's for the best. Carl and I have worked hard. And maybe it's time to retire and enjoy our golden years among our family and our many friends in Temecula. You know, Temecula is still a pleasant, small community now in 1961. We haven't grown much because the Vail family owns much of the surrounding land. But I heard a rumor the other day. Now, you didn't hear this from me. But supposedly, the Vail family is thinking of selling off the ranch to a real estate agent. So who knows what the future holds for Temecula? Thank you for listening. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Who took care of the switchboard while you were having the baby?
That's a good question, and I honestly don't know. If you've ever been in labor, which you haven't, then you know that you're not thinking about things like that. But probably her mother, because her mother still lived here, so probably mom took over. Yes.
Was the switchboard ever located in the old hotel? Because it's there now.
Okay, when Edna ran it, no. But it is in there, yes, as in...
So there was another operator there in the hotel?
No, I think it was just moved to the hotel.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yes.
It's kind of a delicate question, but how long did you and your husband live?
We lived until the mid-70s, I believe 1975, and they died pretty close together, you know. When one died, the other one soon went too. It might have been 73 though, but it was a little more than 10 years after the switchboard closed down. More questions?
So you lived to be about 79 or 80 years old.
I lived to be more like, well, yeah, depending on whether it was 73 or 75, yeah. Yeah, I was in my late 70s, yeah. Yes.
One more thing. So you mentioned that there were rooms people could stay in behind the cafe?
No,
No?
no, that's where Carl and I lived,
Oh,
or where,
Well,
I
what happened?
should get out of character now.
okay. Well, now we know what's in, now it's a store. Are there still rooms behind there where they live?
No, because I believe the building was torn down.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Not the
yes.
same
So
building?
the store that's at the side of Hall's Cafe, and for those of you that don't know, you can see there's a plaque
Yeah.
on Front Street that says site of Hall's Cafe, and it gives some dates. But that's another building.
Hall's
Yes.
is right next to the bank, right?
It's
side?
close to the bank, it's on the same side of the street, and I think it's the same block, is it? But by the way, the bank, the restaurant, the bank, that's what I mentioned when I said the livery stable became a bank. That was the bank that the livery stable became. Just to give you a frame of reference as to where it was. Any other questions? Yes.
I believe the Swing Inn opened in the 20s, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
But
I think it's the oldest restaurant in Old Town.
the oldest still existed.
Right, still
Right,
existed,
right. I went into the Swing Inn and I asked them when it opened because I wanted to mention it at some point, like when I was talking about it in the 20s, but nobody could tell me.
They weren't born then.
Yeah, but it'd be nice if they knew a little, if somebody knew a little history.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yes, Bonnie.
Do you have any relatives still in Temecula area?
You know what? I wish I knew. And nobody's ever come forward and said, you know, I'm.
30.
Oh, I'm sorry. She asked if any of Edna's descendants still lived in Temecula, because I would love to talk to somebody. I know she has children and great-grandchildren because I found one of her daughter's obituaries online. The daughter lived in Idaho Falls, but the obituary mentioned that the daughter had children and grandchildren. One of Edna's great-grandchildren is named Michele, actually.
Go on Facebook and find her.
But I don't know her last name, so. Yes.
In the very beginning, you said something moved from the knoll. Was that the livery stable?
No, it was the schoolhouse.
Oh, the school.
Yeah, the schoolhouse. All right, any other questions?
Have you ever heard the story about the livery stable had that explosion and that's why it closed down?
No, didn't know that.
Tell us, Bonnie.
Tell us the story, Bonnie.
The story?
Yes.
I hope it's true. When we were doing Old Town tours, you know, for the museum, Old Town, one of the stories about the bank is they built it after the livery stable had an explosion. Because the guys in town used to go down to the livery stable. They had a big potbelly stove in there, you know. And apparently, the story goes that they used to steal the wood from where the Merc is. You know, the store where the Merc is. They used to steal the wood, and the guy didn't like that they did that because he knew that they were taking the wood and sticking it into the potbelly stove at the livery stable. So he supposedly hollowed out one of the logs and put in some black powder, and so they chucked it into the potbelly stove. It was, yeah.
Well, there are better ways of solving conflicts.
And so they said nobody was killed or anything. Nobody was apparently hurt that badly, but they said they decided not to
Rebuild it, yeah.
and so in 1914.
Well, yeah, because like I said, you know, livery stables were kind of going the way of the dinosaur at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and supposedly the guy that was the one that was causing the problems, the wife of the wood, was You know, it's yeah, yeah, that had
Joe Winkles?
Joe Winkles.
The guy that owned the blind pig, right? Did he own the blind pig at one point? It sounds like Joe Winkles. Yeah. Okay. All right. No, had not heard that.
Even if it's not, no, I think so.
All righty. Any other questions? Yes,
The schoolhouse is the same one that's on Santiago, correct?
I believe it is. Although, you know, based on the pictures I've seen, I'm guessing, but it is. Okay, thank you. Now we know. Yes.
We'll let you know that right now we're streaming you live, and one of the folks that's watching you is actually the granddaughter of Edna.
Well, I would love to have her get in touch with me. Love to have her get in touch with me. Yes.
More present time today. You said she announced you went to, you taught school at Old Stanley Gardner School?
Yes.
Where is that?
That is down near Pechanga.
Okay.
Some people call it Pechanga Middle School.
Elementary and middle school?
Middle school.
Middle
It's a middle school. Uh-huh.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.